During a family trip to a luxury resort, my daughter-in-law humiliated me in the lobby. We canceled the old woman's room. She deserves to sleep in the garbage bin. Everyone laughed at me. I just walked over to the front desk and presented a gold card. When the general manager recognized me, everyone went pale. "It's a pleasure to have you here, Mrs. Thornton." Follow my story to the very end and tell me which city you're reading this from, so I can see how far my story has traveled. I was 61 years old, and I never imagined that the worst moment of my life would happen in front of total strangers in the grand lobby of a luxury resort. We had been driving for almost 4 hours. My son, David Thornton, was behind the wheel. His wife, Fiona, was in the passenger seat, and I was crammed in the back with my 2 grandchildren. I had been looking forward to this trip for months. Ever since David casually mentioned on a phone call that they were heading to Crestview Lodge for spring break, something in my chest lit up with a hope I should have immediately squashed. Fiona said there was room for me. Well, what she actually said was, "I guess your mother can come if she really wants to," in that tone I knew so well. A tone that turned every invitation into a concession, every gesture into a favor I didn't deserve. But I accepted. Of course I accepted. During the drive, Fiona complained about the traffic, the heat, and the radio station David had picked. When one of the children asked if we could stop for a bathroom break, she sighed as if she had been asked to climb a mountain. "Only 30 more minutes," she snapped with irritation. David said nothing. He never said anything. I looked out the window, trying to get excited, trying to convince myself that this time would be different, that maybe, just maybe, we could be a real family for a few days. Crestview Lodge appeared before us like something out of a glossy magazine. White stone walls, impeccable gardens, and a massive fountain at the main entrance. The parking lot was filled with high-end vehicles, Mercedes, BMWs, and a few Teslas. David parked our modest sedan among them, and for a brief moment, I felt like I was part of something special. We walked into the lobby, and the air conditioning hit me like a blessing after the heat of the car. The place was even more impressive inside. Soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and marble floors so polished you could see your reflection. Elegant families were lining up at the check-in, employees were moving with silent efficiency, and the soft murmur of conversations blended with instrumental music in the background. I lagged behind as David and Fiona approached the counter. The children ran toward a decorative fountain near the waiting area. I clutched my small rolling suitcase, suddenly feeling out of place in my simple floral dress and comfortable walking shoes. Fiona spoke to the young receptionist, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a perfect bun. I watched her check something on the computer, saw Fiona nod, and David sign some papers. Everything seemed fine, normal, routine. Then Fiona turned to me. There was a specific glint in her eyes that I recognized immediately. It was the same look she had right before she made one of her innocent comments, the ones that always sounded like jokes, but left bruises that lasted for days. She approached me with deliberate steps, her heels clicking loudly against the marble. The lobby was full of people, families waiting their turn, employees carrying luggage, guests comfortably seated on the leather sofas. And Fiona raised her voice. She didn't shout, but she spoke loud enough for everyone to turn their heads. "We canceled your room, Brenda." I froze. The words didn't make sense at first. I waited for David to say something, to correct her, to explain there was a mistake, but he just stared at the floor with his hands in his pockets. Fiona continued, her voice growing louder, clearer. "We're not going to waste money on a room for you. You can sleep in the garbage bin. It's what you deserve after all." Laughter. I heard laughter. Not from everyone, but from some. An older man in a cashmere sweater let out a choked chuckle. A younger woman whispered something to her partner, and they both smiled. Even the receptionist looked down, uncomfortable, as if witnessing this was part of her job description. And my son, my only son, the child I raised, the one I fed, the one I held when he had nightmares, he laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. It was nervous, soft. But I heard it, and that was worse than any roar of mockery. The children didn't understand what was happening. My 9-year-old grandson, Jake, looked at me confused. "Grandma, Is she going to sleep with us? Fiona yanked his arm. Quiet, sweetie. The adults are talking. I felt heat rise. First in my chest, then up my neck to my cheeks. It wasn't just shame. It was something deeper. A mix of humiliation, betrayal, and pain so sharp I could barely breathe. The chandelier lights seemed too bright. The murmur of conversations became a distant buzz. My legs were shaking. For a second, I considered turning around and walking out, just leaving, calling a taxi, heading back to the bus station, disappearing from their lives as they clearly wanted. But something inside me shifted in that instant. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was clarity. For years, I had tolerated Fiona's comments, the petty cruelties, the convenient forgetfulness when it came to inviting me to family events, the Christmases where there wasn't room in the car to pick me up, the children's birthdays where the invitation arrived a day after the party, and my son, my David, never said a word, never defended me. He always found an excuse, a justification, a way to minimize what his wife did. And I allowed it because they were my family, because I didn't want to cause trouble, because I was afraid of losing them completely. But in that moment, standing in the middle of that luxurious lobby, with strangers looking at me with pity or amusement, I realized something. I had lost them a long time ago. I inhaled deeply. My hands stopped shaking. I adjusted the handle of my suitcase and walked toward the reception desk. I didn't look at Fiona, and I didn't look at David. I walked with my back straight, my steps firm, even though inside I felt like I was crumbling. The receptionist looked at me with a cautious expression. "Ma'am, can I help you?" I pulled a card out of my handbag. It wasn't a common credit card. It was heavy, with a particular sheen under the lobby lights. I placed it on the marble counter without a word. The receptionist took it. Her eyes went wide. She looked at the card, then at me, then back at the card. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid it through the reader. "Mrs. Thornton," she whispered. Her face went pale. We didn't know you were coming. Excuse me, we had no record of your arrival." Behind me, the silence was absolute. I could feel the stares drilling into my back. The receptionist typed quickly on her computer with nervous movements. "One moment, please. I'm going to call the general manager right away." And then he arrived. A man in an impeccable suit, perfectly coiffed gray hair, walking rapidly from a side office. His expression went from professional to almost reverent when his eyes landed on me. "Mrs. Thornton!" His voice resonated through the lobby. He rushed toward me. "We had no idea you would be gracing us with your presence. Your name is on the list of resort owners." The world seemed to stop. Owners. I heard a choked gasp behind me. I knew who it was. The manager, Robert, continued speaking, but I could barely focus on his words. Something about the presidential suite, about special arrangements, about how the entire staff was at my disposal. My heart pounded, not from nerves, but from a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I turned around slowly. David was white, completely pale. His mouth opened and closed as if he wanted to speak, but the words were stuck in his throat. Fiona, on the other hand, had her face frozen in an expression of pure shock. Her green eyes, usually so calculating, now reflected something I had never seen in her. Fear. The children were pulling on their father's sleeve, asking questions he couldn't answer. The people who had laughed moments before were now watching us with awkward curiosity. Some murmured among themselves, others simply stared, waiting to see what would happen next. "Mrs. Thornton," Robert gently touched my arm. "Shall we take your luggage to your suite immediately? We have champagne on ice, and the chef can prepare anything you desire for dinner." I nodded silently. I still didn't trust my voice. "Perfect. And your companions?" He looked at David and Fiona with a neutral, professional expression, but there was something in his eyes. Recognition. He had witnessed the entire scene. "They have their own reservation," I said. Finally. My voice came out firmer than I expected. "They will not be traveling with me." Robert nodded. "Of course. If you need anything at all, just dial 0 from your room." He gestured to a young bellhop. "Escort Mrs. Thornton to the presidential suite." As the bellhop took my suitcase, David took a step forward. "Mom, we need to talk." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw a 37-year-old man, not the boy he used to be. I saw the lines around his eyes, the gray starting at his temples, the slightly hunched posture of someone carrying an invisible weight. But more than anything, I saw a stranger, someone who looked like my son, but had ceased to be him a long time ago. "Not now, David." "But Mom, I don't understand how—" "Why didn't you ever tell us?" "After," I said, and followed the bellhop toward the elevators. The presidential suite was on the 15th floor. The bellhop made polite conversation during the ride, mentioning the amenities, the restaurant hours, and the location of the spa. I nodded without really listening. My mind was elsewhere, in another time. When the suite door closed behind me, I could finally breathe. The room was spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling windows with mountain views, elegant furniture, a full kitchen, even a baby grand piano in the corner. There were fresh flowers in crystal vases, a bottle of champagne chilling on ice, as the manager had promised, and gourmet chocolates on the coffee table. I collapsed onto the blue velvet sofa and closed my eyes. The truth was more complicated than anyone imagined. 15 years ago, when my husband, Raymond Thornton, passed away, he left me more than anyone knew. Raymond had been a quiet, hard-working man, the kind of person who went unnoticed in a crowd. We had lived modestly, never showing off, never drawing attention. But Raymond had been smart about investments, very smart. When he died, I discovered we had almost $2 million in various assets: properties, stocks, bonds. And this resort, Crestview Lodge, had been one of his last investments. He had bought a 30% stake when the place was under construction, betting it would become a successful luxury destination. He was right. After his death, I had decisions to make. David was 22 then, recently graduated from college, full of ideas about how to help me manage the finances. Fiona, whom he had only been dating for 6 months, was there for every conversation, every family meeting, offering suggestions. I remember one particular evening. We were sitting at the kitchen table in my old house reviewing documents. David had that serious expression he put on when he wanted to seem like an adult. "Mom, I think you should let me handle this. It's complicated. I don't want you to stress yourself or make mistakes." Mistakes. As if 40 years of marriage and running a household hadn't taught me anything about money. Fiona was beside him, nodding with a worried expression. "It's a lot to process, Brenda. David just wants to take care of you. Maybe it would be better if he handled the accounts, the investments. You could just relax, enjoy your fixed income." Fixed income, as if I were a helpless old woman. But I nodded. I let them believe they would handle it. I showed them a few accounts, a few documents, just enough to satisfy them, and kept the rest for myself. The largest investments, the properties, the business stakes, including this resort. Why did I do it? At first, I didn't know. There was something about the way they talked to me, the way they assumed my incompetence, that made me want to protect what Raymond and I had built. Then, as the months turned into years, it became something else. It became a test. I wanted to see who they truly were when they thought I had nothing to offer them but my presence. I wanted to know if they loved me as a mother or merely tolerated me as an obligation. The answer came slowly, painfully. David and Fiona got married 1 year after Raymond's death. They didn't ask me for any help with the wedding. Fiona said her parents would handle everything. I assumed it was because they wanted to control the details. Years later, a cousin casually commented that Fiona had said it wasn't worth asking Brenda for money because she barely had enough to survive on her fixed income. My fixed income, which they assumed was all I had. When the children were born, I tried to be present. I offered to babysit, to help, to be the grandmother I wanted to be. But there were always excuses. Fiona was busy with her routine. The children had too many activities. It wasn't a good time for visitors. They invited me for Christmas, but always with that tone. "I guess you can come if you don't have other plans," as if it were a favor, as if my presence were a burden they endured out of duty. And the birthdays, oh God, the birthdays. David never forgot Fiona's. Flowers, elegant dinners, expensive gifts. My 60th birthday last year passed without a call. When I finally called 3 days later, David said, "I'm sorry, Mom. Work completely slipped my mind." Fiona had thrown her surprise party 2 weeks earlier. 40 guests, live music, a 3-tiered cake. I swallowed the pain again and again, but somewhere deep inside, a part of me registered every slight, every omission, every time they chose to exclude me. And that part had grown, solidifying into something cold and clear. They were not my family, they were my failed exam. The sweet phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I ignored it. It rang 3 more times before stopping. Then my cell phone started vibrating. David. I ignored the call, then another, and another. Finally, a text message arrived. "Mom, please, we need to talk. We're in the lobby restaurant, waiting for you." I stared at the message for a long time. Then slowly, I typed a reply. "Meet me in the restaurant at 7. Just you and Fiona. The children should stay with the hotel sitter." Dinner was in 2 hours. I took a long shower, letting the hot water loosen the tension in my shoulders. I put on a dress I had bought months ago but never worn. Elegant, deep navy blue, with a cut that looked better on me than I remembered. I styled my hair, put on a little makeup. When I looked in the mirror, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw a woman who didn't apologize for existing. I went down to the restaurant exactly at 7. The place was beautiful, dimly lit, with candles on every table, and the gentle clinking of glasses and silverware. I saw David and Fiona at a corner table. David looked agitated, nervously swirling his wine glass. Fiona had that expression I knew well. Forced control, tight lips, hands on the table, fingers interlocked too tightly. I sat across from them without a word. A waiter immediately appeared, filling my water glass and offering the menu. I ordered without looking, keeping my eyes on my son. The silence stretched out, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, David broke it. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell us?" I took a sip of water before answering. "Tell you what exactly? That I own this place? That I have money? All this time we thought you were barely surviving on Dad's fixed income." "I never said that," I replied calmly. "You assumed it." Fiona leaned forward, her voice controlled but strained. "You made us look like fools out there in front of all those people." I looked her straight in the eye. For the first time in 15 years, I met her gaze without looking away. "No," I said softly. "You made yourselves look exactly like what you are." Fiona recoiled as if I had slapped her. David opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, placing them carefully before quietly withdrawing. No one touched their plate. "I don't understand," David finally said, his voice trembling. "If you had money, if you had all this, why did you let us think you were poor?" "That I was a burden," I finished for him, "that I needed your pity." I picked up my fork, cutting a piece of salmon with precise movements. "Because I wanted to see something." "See what?" Fiona practically spat the words out. I chewed slowly, savoring the food they hadn't even tasted. "I wanted to see if you loved me without expecting anything in return. I wanted to know if I was worth something to you beyond what I could give you." David shook his head, confused. "Mom, we've always loved you. Always." The words would have moved me years ago. Now they just sounded hollow. "Did you?" I asked softly. "Like when you left me out of the Christmas dinner 3 years ago because there wasn't room in the car. I checked later. You rented a 7-person SUV and there were 5 of you." David blinked. There was a misunderstanding with the rental. "Or my 60th birthday last year," I continued, my voice still calm, almost conversational. "Not a call, not a text, but 2 weeks before, you spent $5,000 on Fiona's surprise party." I called you afterward, David protested weakly. 3 days afterward, and only after I called first, I said, taking a sip of wine. And your excuse was that you were busy with work. Fiona leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with barely contained anger. This is ridiculous. You're acting like a resentful child, keeping score of every little mistake. Little mistake, I repeated. I placed the fork on the plate with a soft clink. Fiona, in 15 years, you've invited me to your house exactly 11 times, I counted. And of those 11, 6 were because you needed me to watch the kids while you went out. That's not fair, David said. We lead busy lives, Mom. We have responsibilities. I know, I nodded. That's why I never complained. That's why I always said yes when you needed something. I watched the kids when they had the flu, and you had that important conference. Remember, David? I was awake for 3 nights straight. When you came back, you didn't even ask how they were. You just said, thanks, and went to bed. Silence returned to the table. I could see David processing, remembering. His face contracted with each memory. Or when your washing machine broke down, I continued, looking at Fiona. I offered you money to repair it. You said you didn't need charity from anyone. But 2 weeks later, you asked David to buy you a new one. He took $3,000 from his emergency fund. Fiona pursed her lips. We didn't know you could... Exactly, I interrupted. You didn't know because you never asked. You assumed I was poor, that I was a nuisance, that my only function was to be available when you needed me and to disappear when you didn't. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he'd made since childhood when overwhelmed. Mom, if you had told us... What? My voice rose for the first time, not much, but enough for nearby tables to turn. I lowered my tone. If I had told you I had money, you would have treated me differently. Does that make this better or worse? David didn't answer. I took another sip of wine, feeling its warmth go down my throat. When your father died, you two came home every week, remember? Helping me with papers, with bank calls, with everything. I paused. But as soon as you thought everything was settled, as soon as you assumed I only had a basic fixed income and nothing more to offer, the visits spaced out. First every 2 weeks, then once a month, then only holidays, and then not even that. We had the kids, Fiona protested. We had a life to build. I know, I nodded. And I never asked to be the center of your life. I only asked not to be forgotten completely. David took a deep breath, his eyes watering. Mom, I didn't realize. I didn't know you felt this way. I didn't look at him directly. Not once did you notice that your wife spoke of me as if I were a burden. Not once did you wonder why your mother spent every single holiday alone. He fell silent. I looked at Fiona. Last Christmas, your sister posted pictures of your family dinner on Facebook. I saw all of you. 20 people around that massive table. David's family, yours, friends. I was a 15-minute drive away. I ate a turkey sandwich in front of the television. You told us you had other plans, Fiona said defensively. I lied, I said, because I knew the invitation was out of obligation, not because you genuinely wanted me there. I placed my napkin on the table. And the truth, Fiona, is that I preferred to be alone than to endure another dinner where you treated me like furniture. That's unfair, she hissed. I've always been nice to you. Nice! I let out a humorless laugh. Fiona, you told your mother I was difficult to please. I heard you. I was in the bathroom at your house during Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. You two were in the kitchen. You said I was critical, demanding, that I always found something to complain about. Fiona paled slightly. I've never complained. Not about the food, not about how you raise your kids, not about anything. But you needed to paint me as the villain to justify how you treated me. I stood up from the table. So no, I wasn't the one who made you look like fools this afternoon. You did that all by yourselves. Wait, David stood up too. You can't just leave. We have to fix this. There's nothing to fix, David. You showed me who you are for 15 years, and I finally believed you. So what? Fiona's voice was shrill. Are you going to punish us? To disinherit us? Was this all just to humiliate us? I looked at her with a mix of pity and exhaustion. No, Fiona, I'm not going to punish you. I don't need to. You're already living with the consequences of your choices. I'm just refusing to continue living with them. Mom, please. David caught up to me, grabbing my arm. His touch was gentle, almost pleading. Give me a chance to fix this. Just tell me what to do. I looked at him. I saw tears in his eyes. I saw genuine regret on his face. But I also saw something else. I saw a 37-year-old man who had just realized his mother had money and that he had wasted years of potential benefits. I don't want you to fix anything, I said softly, freeing my arm. I just want you to leave me in peace. I returned to my suite with a heavy heart, but a clear mind. The room phone started ringing 20 minutes later. I disconnected it. My cell phone vibrated constantly with messages. I silenced them all. I poured myself a glass of wine from the minibar and went out onto the balcony. The nighttime view of the mountains was breathtaking. Flickering lights from distant homes, stars shining in a clear sky, the cool air filling my lungs. For the first time in 15 years, I felt light. The next morning, I went down to the restaurant early. I ordered breakfast. I enjoyed fresh coffee and toast with homemade jam. I read the newspaper an employee courteously brought me. It was almost normal, almost peaceful until David appeared. He looked terrible, swollen eyes, wrinkled clothes, as if he hadn't slept. He sat across from me without asking permission. I didn't sleep all night, he said, his voice hoarse. I've been thinking, remembering. And you're right, Mom, about everything. I continued eating my breakfast. Fiona and I fought hard. She says you're overreacting, that you're being manipulative, but He rubbed his hands over his face. I started remembering things I had ignored, things I let slide because it was easier than confronting Fiona. I took a sip of coffee. And I realized I've been a bad son. His voice broke. The worst son. Yes, I said simply. You have been. He seemed surprised by my blunt honesty. But David, I continued, setting down my cup, I didn't come here looking for an apology. I didn't come here looking for you to finally see what you've done. I came because Fiona invited me. And foolishly, I thought maybe things would be different. They can be, he said quickly. We can change. I can change. Why? I asked. Because now you know I have money? Because you realize there might be an inheritance to lose? No, he protested, but there was doubt in his eyes. Because you're my mother. I've always been your mother, David. That didn't change yesterday. What changed was your perception of what I can offer you. He remained silent, unable to deny it. I got up from the table, leaving enough cash to cover the bill, even though I knew I didn't need to. I'm going home tomorrow. You can stay the rest of the week. It's paid for. Consider it my last gift as a mother. Last? His voice trembled. Mom, you can't be serious. Completely serious. I slung my handbag over my shoulder. I don't want your money back or your empty apologies. I just want peace. And that peace does not include continuing to be treated as a second-class citizen in my own family. I left him sitting there, his head in his hands, but I knew it wasn't over. It's never that simple with family. I spent the rest of the morning at the resort spa. I had a massage, a facial. I sat in the sauna, letting the heat sweat out all the accumulated tensions of the years. The staff treated me with a deference that would have previously made me uncomfortable, but now I simply accepted it. I was part owner of this place. I had invested my money wisely when others assumed I knew how to do nothing but cook and clean. I was in the relaxation room, wrapped in a soft robe and sipping herbal tea, when one of the spa employees approached with an awkward expression. Mrs. Thornton, excuse the interruption. There's a very insistent lady at the reception asking for you. She says she's family. I sighed. Tell her I'm unavailable. The employee nodded and withdrew. I closed my eyes, trying to reclaim some of the peace I had felt moments before. But 5 minutes later, my cell phone started ringing. It was a local number I didn't recognize. I answered out of sheer curiosity. Hello, Brenda. It was Fiona, of course. I'm in the lobby. We need to talk now. I'm busy. I don't care what you're busy with. Come down immediately or I'll come up myself. Something in her tone, that air of authority she had always used with me, ignited something inside me. If you try to come up to my suite, I will call security. Silence on the other end. Then, in a more controlled but still tense voice, please, just 5 minutes. I considered hanging up, but there was something different in her voice. It wasn't the demanding, confident Fiona I knew. There was a nuance of despair. The lounge next to the lobby. 5 minutes, not one more. I got dressed unhurriedly, taking my time. If Fiona was going to demand my presence, she could wait. I went down 15 minutes later. I found her sitting rigidly on one of the leather sofas, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she saw me, she immediately stood up. She wasn't wearing her usual perfect makeup. Her eyes were red, her hair not so impeccably styled. She looked human, vulnerable. I sat across from her without saying a word. "You're destroying my marriage," she said abruptly. I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not doing anything. Your marriage is destroying itself." David didn't sleep last night. He was awake, looking through old photos, reading old messages. He's realized... She bit her lip. He's realized things. That you manipulated him into pushing me away, that you built a narrative where I was the problematic mother-in-law to justify your cruelty. I kept my voice neutral. Yes, I imagine realizing that must be uncomfortable. It wasn't like that, she protested, but without conviction. I just wanted us to be our own family, without interferences. Interferences. I repeated the word slowly. Fiona, in 15 years, I've seen you maybe 30 times. If that's interference, I don't know what absence is. She wrung her hands. You're right. I know. I've been awful to you, but you have to understand. My own mother was controlling, always meddling in my life, in my marriage. When David and I got married, I swore I wouldn't let that happen. So you assumed I would be the same. Yes. She said it so quietly I barely heard her. And every time you tried to get closer, I saw it as an invasion, as control. So I pushed you away. She paused. And David let me because he trusted me, because I made him believe I was doing it for us. It was the most honest confession I had heard from her, but it came too late, far too late. And now what, Fiona? You're here to apologize because David finally opened his eyes? Or because you realize there's money you could have been enjoying all these years? Her face contorted. It's not about the money. It's not. I leaned forward. Because just yesterday you said you had canceled my room. You sent me to the garbage bin. Did you do that out of family love? Tears began to roll down her cheeks. I was angry. God, I don't know. I was annoyed because David insisted you come, because once again we had to put up with his mother. And in my head you were this figure who represented everything I didn't want to be, a nosy, needy, demanding mother-in-law. I never was any of those things. I know, she sobbed openly now. I know, and David is throwing it in my face. He's reviewing every moment, every excuse I gave not to invite you. Last night he yelled at me. He told me I'm cruel, that I'm manipulative, that I've become my mother. She covered her face with her hands. And he's right. Seeing Fiona break down like this should have given me satisfaction, should have felt like vindication, but I only felt weariness. Fiona, I didn't come here to destroy your marriage. I came because foolishly I still had hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could be family. But what you did yesterday in front of all those people only confirmed what I already knew. I am not welcome in your life, and I probably never was. I can change, she said desperately. I can be better. Just give me a chance. A chance for what? To pretend you appreciate me? To invite me to awkward dinners where we all pretend the last 15 years didn't happen? I shook my head. No, Fiona, I don't want that. Then what do you want? Her voice was pleading. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. I want you to leave me alone. The words came out colder than I intended. I want you and David to live your lives, raise your children, and forget about me. Because that's what you've been doing anyway. Now, we'll just make it official." She stood up abruptly. "You can't be serious. The kids need you. David needs you." "The kids don't know me, and David—" I paused. "David made his choice a long time ago. He chose his comfort over my well-being. He chose your version of reality over the truth, and now that the truth is out, I can't just pretend that doesn't matter." Fiona wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "You're his mother. Mothers are supposed to forgive." Supposed to. I looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and sadness. "Fiona, I've spent 15 years forgiving every omission, every slight, every small humiliation. Forgiveness isn't infinite, and mine ran out yesterday when you told me I deserved to sleep in a garbage bin." She stood there trembling. Then, in a low voice, she asked, "What are we going to tell the children?" "That is not my problem." I stood up. "But if you want my advice, tell them the truth. Tell them their grandmother tried to be a part of their lives, but their mother wouldn't let her. And when they finally had a chance to be a real family, they chose to humiliate her publicly." "That will make them hate me." "Possibly," I said, "but it's better they hate the truth than love a lie." I started to walk away, but her voice stopped me. "Brenda." I turned halfway. "You're right about everything, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I treated you like that. I'm sorry I wasted 15 years, and I'm sorry it's too late to fix it." Her voice broke again. "But for what it's worth, I truly regret it." I looked at her for a long moment. I saw genuine repentance in her eyes. I saw a woman facing the consequences of years of cruelty. And for a second, just 1 second, I considered giving in. But then I remembered. I remembered every lonely Christmas, every forgotten birthday, every poisonous comment disguised as a joke, and I remembered yesterday, standing in that lobby, feeling the humiliation burn my skin while my own family laughed. "I know," I said finally, "but I'm sorry doesn't undo the damage, and it certainly doesn't rebuild 15 years of broken trust." I left her there, crying on the leather sofa, and went up to my suite. That afternoon, I called the general manager of the resort. "Robert, I need to make some changes to my stake here." We met in his office, an elegant room overlooking the gardens. I explained my situation, or at least enough for him to understand. He was discreet, professional, but I saw comprehension in his eyes. "Mrs. Thornton, are you sure? This has been a very successful investment for you." "I know, but I need a change. I need to separate myself from anything that ties me to this area, to this life." I signed the papers he had prepared. "Sell my share. Find another investor. Use the money to establish a trust for my grandchildren, accessible only when they turn 25. But neither David nor Fiona will have access to it." Robert nodded, taking notes. "And your suite, your privileges, they will end tomorrow when I leave." "I understand." He paused. "If I may say so, ma'am, I regret what happened in the lobby. The staff is quite dismayed by how you were treated." "It's not your fault, or the staff's." I stood up. "Sometimes family is the most dangerous place to be." I returned to my suite and began packing. I didn't have much. I had never been one to accumulate things. As I folded my clothes, my cell phone rang. It was David. I hesitated, but finally answered. "Yes, Mom." His voice sounded broken. "Fiona told me about your conversation. Please, don't do this. Don't abandon us." "I am not abandoning you, David. You abandoned me years ago. I am just officially recognizing what was already reality." "That's not fair. I was an idiot. I admit it. But I'm your son. Your only son." "I know," I said, closing my suitcase. "And you will always be my son. But that doesn't mean I have to put up with how I'm treated. Love isn't enough when it comes wrapped in contempt. Give me a chance to show you I can change, please." I sat on the bed, holding the phone to my ear. "David, do you know how many times in those 15 years I waited for you to change? I waited for you to wake up one day and see what Fiona was doing to me. I waited for you to defend your mother, to choose to stand up for me, even if it was uncomfortable." I paused. "But you never did. Not once." "I was blind. She manipulated me." No, David. Don't blame only her. You saw what you wanted to see. You heard what you wanted to hear because it was easier to believe I was the problem than to confront the fact that your wife was cruel. Silence on the other end then, in a barely audible voice. What do I do now? Live your life. Be better with your children than you were with me. And someday, when you're ready to be honest with yourself about all of this, maybe we can talk. When will that be? I don't know. Maybe never. I took a deep breath. But for now, I need distance. I need to heal. And I can't do that if I keep waiting for you to change. I hung up before he could respond. That night, standing on my sweet balcony for the last time, I looked out at the mountains under the moonlight. I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I had waited so long for them to see me, to value me, and when they finally did, it was only because they discovered I had something they wanted. Tomorrow, I would leave. I would leave this resort, this family, this life that was never truly mine. And for the first time in 15 years, the idea of being alone didn't scare me. It filled me with a peace I didn't know was possible. The morning of my departure dawned gray, with low clouds covering the mountains. There was something fitting about that, as if the weather reflected the mood of these last few days. I finished packing early, leaving the suite immaculate, as if I had never been there. I was in the lobby checking out when I saw him. David was sitting on one of the sofas near the entrance, looking as if he had slept there. His clothes were the same as the day before, wrinkled and neglected. He had deep circles under his eyes and disheveled hair. When our eyes met, he stood up immediately. "Mom, wait!" The manager, Robert, who was processing my checkout, looked at me with a questioning expression. I nodded slightly. He understood and discreetly withdrew. David approached but maintained a certain distance, as if afraid I might vanish if he got too close. "I know you said you needed space, I know, but I can't let you go like this, I can't." "David?" "No, please, let me talk." He ran his hands over his face. I spent all night awake, not just thinking, but remembering, truly remembering. And you are right, Mom, about absolutely everything. A group of guests walked past us, heading to the restaurant. David lowered his voice, though the desperation in it remained evident. I remembered that Christmas, when Fiona said there wasn't room in the car. I didn't question anything. I just accepted her word because it was easier than confronting her. His eyes filled with tears. "And your birthday, God, your 60th birthday. Fiona reminded me that morning. She said, 'It's your mother's birthday today.' And I said, 'I'll call her later.' But I didn't. I went to work. I got tangled up in meetings, and when I came home, Fiona was planning her surprise party, and I just forgot." "I know, David." "No, you don't know everything. Last night, after you talked to Fiona, she told me everything. She told me things I had chosen not to see. How she talked about you when I wasn't around. How she made sure family invitations arrived late. How—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "How she actively kept you away from the children because she didn't want you to have any influence over them." That hurt more than expected. I had suspected it, of course, but hearing it confirmed was different. "The kids asked about you," David continued, his voice trembling. "Especially Jake. He would ask, 'When is Grandma coming?' And Fiona always had an excuse, that you were busy, that you were sick, that you had other plans, and I—" His face contorted with pain. "I was there. I heard the lies, and I said nothing." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because it was easier. The tears finally fell down his cheeks. Because confronting Fiona meant admitting that I had married someone capable of that cruelty. It meant admitting that I had failed you. And it was much easier to believe her version, where you were fine, where you didn't need us, where everything was justified. He sank onto the nearest sofa, covering his face with his hands. I remained standing, my suitcase beside me, watching my son fall apart. "There's something else," he said, his voice muffled by his hands. "Something I never told you." I waited. He slowly lowered his hands. His eyes were red, swollen. When Dad died, before we started going through the documents, Fiona told me something. She said I was the man of the family now, that I had to take care of you because you wouldn't be able to do it alone, that widows your age become dependent, needy. The air seemed to leave my lungs. And I believed her. I went to those meetings with you expecting to find a lost, incapable woman. But you... A sad smile crossed his face. You knew exactly what to do. You had everything organized. You handled every piece of paper, every call, every decision with clarity. And that bothered her. It bothered her that we didn't need you. And you? He paused for a long time. I felt ashamed. I realized I had underestimated my own mother, that I had believed that without Dad, you would crumble. And when you didn't, when you showed you were perfectly capable, I didn't know how to process that. So I let Fiona create a new narrative, one where you were okay, but not so okay that you didn't need us, one where we could visit you when it suited us without feeling guilty. The silence between us was dense, heavy with years of unspoken truths. David, I said finally, my voice softer than I expected. Why are you telling me all this now? Because I need you to know that I know exactly what I did. I can't hide behind I didn't know, or Fiona manipulated me. I chose every time I ignored your call, every time I found an excuse not to visit, every time I allowed Fiona to treat you badly. I chose. He stood up, moving closer to me. And I chose wrong. I chose my comfort over your well-being. I chose my marriage over my mother. And now, I asked, now that you know I have money, now that you realize there's an inheritance at stake. It's not about that. His voice was firm despite the tears. Last night, before Fiona told me everything, before I processed anything about the money, I looked at old photos. I found one from my college graduation. Dad was there. You were there. And I remembered that day. I remembered how proud you looked, how you hugged me and told me I had achieved something incredible. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. And then I looked at more recent photos. Jake's elementary school graduation last year. Fiona was there. Her parents were there. My in-laws. But you weren't. And I realized we hadn't even invited you. We hadn't even thought of you. David, I let my son grow up without knowing his grandmother. I let Fiona turn my children into strangers to you. His voice became more desperate. And it wasn't because of the money I didn't know you had. It was because it was easier to keep you at a distance than to deal with the discomfort of including you. Part of me wanted to console him. The part of me that had been a mother for 37 years wanted to hug him and tell him everything would be all right. But another part, the part that had suffered in silence for 15 years, stood firm. I appreciate your honesty, I said calmly. I really do. But David, acknowledging your mistakes doesn't unmake them. I know, he nodded frantically. I know, but it has to be a start. There has to be a way to fix this. Fix it for what? For whom? I looked at him directly. So you can feel better about your choices? So you can tell yourself you tried? So you can be a part of your grandchildren's lives? So you can be my mother again? I never stopped being your mother, David. You stopped being my son. The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. I saw how they hit him, how his face contorted in pain. Then tell me what to do, he pleaded. Tell me how to fix 15 years of mistakes. Tell me how to win you back. You can't. The words were simple, final. There's no reset button for this, David. There is no series of apologies or gestures that will bring back the lost time. Then what? You're just giving up on me? Discarding me like I discarded you? The accusation in his voice surprised me. I'm not discarding you. I'm freeing both of us. I don't want to be freed. I want my mother. Do you want her? I asked gently. Or do you want the idea of a mother? The woman who forgives everything, who is available when you need her, who disappears when you don't. Because that woman no longer exists. David died yesterday in that lobby when your wife humiliated me and you laughed. I didn't laugh because it was funny. I laughed because I was nervous, because I didn't know what to do. You could have defended me. You could have stopped Fiona before things went that far. You could have done 1,000 different things, but you chose to laugh. I picked up my suitcase, and that laugh told me everything I needed to know. David desperately blocked my path. Please, Mom, not like this. Don't end it like this. I'm not ending anything. You ended this years ago. I'm just officially recognizing it. The kids need you. The kids have parents. They have grandparents on Fiona's side. They'll be fine. And me? His voice completely broke. I will be fine too. I looked at him, this man who had been my baby, my little boy, my son. I saw the genuine pain in his eyes. I saw the regret. But I also saw years of damage that couldn't be erased with tears. I don't know, David, I said honestly, but that is no longer my responsibility. I moved to walk past him, but his voice stopped me one last time. Is there anything I can do? Anything? I turned halfway. Yes. Be better. Not with me. It's too late for that. But be better with your children. Teach them that people are not disposable, that family isn't just a word. And when they grow up and ask about their grandmother, tell them the truth. Tell them they had her, but you lost her. This time, when I walked toward the exit, he didn't stop me. The taxi was waiting. The driver took my suitcase and put it in the trunk. Before getting in, I looked back one last time. David was still in the lobby, motionless, watching me leave. I had imagined this moment in so many different ways. I thought I would feel triumph, vindication, even joy. But I only felt a deep void, not for what I was leaving behind, but for what I never truly had. I got into the taxi. To the airport, please. As we drove away from the resort, I didn't look back again. There was no reason to. That chapter of my life was over. 6 months later, I woke up in my new home to the sound of gulls and the smell of salt in the air. The house I had bought on the Northern California coast was modest compared to what I could afford, but it was perfect. 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen with an ocean view, and a small garden where I had planted herbs and wildflowers. It was mine, completely mine. I made coffee and went out onto the terrace with a blanket over my shoulders. The sunrise painted the sky in oranges and pinks, and the waves gently crashed against the rocks below. This morning ritual had become sacred to me. It was the moment where I simply existed, without expectations, without disappointments, without the pressure of being who others needed me to be. The first few months after leaving the resort had been strange. David called me 17 times the first week. I let them all go to voicemail. I listened to every message, not because I wanted to reply, but because I needed to confirm my decision. Every call was the same. Apologies, pleas, promises of change, but the words no longer meant anything. The words had never been the problem. Eventually, the calls decreased, once a week, then once every 2 weeks. Now, I occasionally saw his number pop up, but I no longer felt the urgency to answer. I had made peace with my decision. The sale of my stake in the resort had been finalized the previous month. Robert had kept me informed throughout the process. I asked him not to reveal my new address to anyone, and he respected my privacy. The money from the sale, almost $3 million, was divided according to my instructions. 2/3 went into a trust for my grandchildren, accessible when they turned 25. The remaining 1/3 I donated to organizations that support older women in situations of family abuse. It was ironic, but also fitting. My phone vibrated on the table next to my coffee. A text message from an unknown number. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Brenda, it's Marcia, Fiona's mother. I need to talk to you. It's important, please. Marcia." I hadn't spoken to her since David and Fiona's wedding almost 16 years ago. I hesitated for several minutes before replying. "About what?" The answer came quickly. "About my daughter. About what she did to you. Please give me 5 minutes of your time. I should have said no. I should have blocked the number and continued with my peaceful morning. But something in her message, a desperation I recognized in myself, made me respond. Call me. The phone rang seconds later. Brenda, thank you for answering. Marcia's voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. I know I have no right to ask you for anything after what Fiona did. No, you don't, I said simply. I know, but I need you to know something. I need you to know that Fiona, she learned that behavior from me. She paused, and I heard her shaky breath. I was a terrible mother-in-law, controlling, critical, always meddling in my son's marriage, and when they finally got fed up with me, when they cut me out of their lives, I was filled with bitterness. I didn't say anything, waiting for her to continue. Fiona saw all that. She saw how my interference destroyed my relationship with my son, and when she married David, she swore she would never let her mother-in-law do the same. She broke off. Except, her voice cracked, except you were never like me. You never meddled, and yet she treated you as if you had. Why are you telling me this, Marcia? Because 2 weeks ago, Fiona came to see me. It was the first time we had spoken in months, and she told me something that broke my heart. She said, I became you, Mom. I did exactly what I swore I would never do. I became you. I closed my eyes, feeling a sadness I hadn't expected. Not for Fiona, but for the cycle, for how damage repeats itself generation after generation. Marcia, I appreciate you calling, but this changes nothing. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm not calling to ask you to forgive Fiona. I'm calling because I need someone to know that I'm sorry. I planted the seeds of her behavior, and you paid the price. Not just me, I said softly. David too, the children too, and Fiona herself. Yes. There was a long silence. Is there anything I can do? I challenged myself to respond. Break the cycle with your other grandchildren. If Fiona lets you near them, be different. Be the grandmother I never could be. I heard a sob on the other end of the line. I will. I promise. We hung up shortly after. I sat on my terrace looking at the ocean, processing the conversation. Marcia was right about one thing. Fiona had learned her behavior, but she had also chosen to repeat it. And that choice, that was entirely hers. 2 weeks later, I received a package in the mail. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting on the envelope. It was from David. Inside was a small box and a letter. I opened the letter first, my hands trembling slightly. Mom, I don't expect you to reply to this. I don't expect you to read beyond the first line, but I need you to know a few things. Fiona and I are getting divorced. Not because of you, though I know you were the catalyst for me to finally see the truth. We're divorcing because we built a marriage on lies and manipulation, and neither of us can keep living like that. The kids are confused. Jake asks about you constantly. Lily is too small to understand, but she feels the absence. I've been telling them about you. Not the version Fiona created, but the truth. I tell them about how you took care of me when I was a child, how much you sacrificed for Dad and me, how you were strong when the world expected you to fall apart. And I've told them how I failed you. The box contains something of Dad's. I found it among his things when I finally forced myself to go through the boxes in the attic. It's a journal he kept. In it, he talks about you a lot, about how much he admired you, about how you were his favorite person in the world. There's one entry in particular that is marked. It's from the day he died. He wrote it that morning, before his heart attack. It says, "If anything happens to me, I know Brenda will be fine. She's the strongest person I know. But I hope David sees it too. I hope he takes care of her the way she deserves, not the way he thinks she needs." I read it, and I cried for 3 days straight. Because Dad knew you, he saw you, and I never did. I'm not sending this to get your forgiveness. I'm sending it because you deserve to know that Dad loved you exactly as you were, and that I eventually learned to see what he always saw. Be happy, Mom. Be everything you could never be when you were trying to be part of our family. With love and eternal regret, David. I held the letter with trembling hands. Silent tears rolled down my cheeks as I opened the box. Inside was Raymond's journal, leather-bound and worn, with bookmarks sticking out. I opened it to the page David had pointed out. Raymond's familiar, cherished handwriting filled the page. I read his words about me, about our life together, about his confidence in my strength. And at the end, that line about David, that hope that was never fulfilled. I closed the journal and held it against my chest, looking out at the ocean. Raymond had known me, truly seen me, and in a way, that had to be enough. I put the journal on my nightstand, where I could see it every morning. But I didn't reply to David's letter, not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to say. He had gone through his process, he had reached his conclusions, and I was at peace with mine. The months continued to pass. Winter arrived, bringing storms that made the ocean roar. Spring followed, with wildflowers covering the cliffs, and slowly I built a life that was entirely my own. I met other women in town, widows, divorcees, some who had never married. We formed a group that met on Thursdays for dinner and to share stories. They weren't my blood family, but they felt more like family than the people I shared DNA with. One summer afternoon, I was in the garden when my phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Mrs. Thornton. This is Jennifer from the Harbor Cafe. You have a visitor asking for you. He says he's your grandson." My heart stopped. My grandson. Yes, a young boy, 9 or 10 years old. He's with his father. They're asking if you can meet them here. Jake and David. Part of me wanted to say no. I wanted to protect the peace I had built. But another part, a smaller but insistent part, was curious. "Tell them I'll be there in 20 minutes. I changed into more presentable clothes, brushed my hair, and took a deep breath. The cafe was only a 10-minute walk from my house, but I took a longer route, needing time to prepare myself. When I arrived, I saw them immediately. David was at a table by the window, looking thin and tired. Next to him was Jake, clearly 10 years old now, with his father's dark hair and my eyes. Jake saw me first. He stood up immediately, but he didn't run to me. Instead, he waited, as if unsure of his reception. I approached slowly. David stood up too, hands in his pockets, looking awkward. "Hello, Mom," he said softly. "David." I nodded. Then I looked at Jake. "Hello, Jake." "Hi, Grandma." His voice was timid, uncertain. We sat down. A waitress came over and I ordered coffee for David and me, hot chocolate for Jake. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "Dad says we didn't see you for a long time because he made mistakes." I looked at David. He nodded slightly, encouraging me to answer. "Yes," I said carefully, "that's true." "And he says you didn't want to see us because we hurt you." "That's also true." Jake looked down at his hot chocolate. I'm sorry I didn't get to know you better." My chest tightened. "Jake, honey, none of this was your fault. None of it. Dad says you own hotels, and that you're very smart." "I was part owner of a resort, not anymore." "Why not?" I glanced at David, then back at Jake. "Because I needed a fresh start." Jake nodded as if he understood, although he probably didn't. He drank his chocolate in silence. David finally spoke. "I didn't come here to ask you for anything, Mom. I came because Jake deserves to know his grandmother, and because—" He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Because I wanted you to see that I'm trying to be better, trying to teach Jake what I didn't learn until it was too late." "How did you find me?" "Robert," he confessed. "I pleaded with him. I told him it wasn't for me but for Jake. Eventually he gave me the town's name. The rest was easy. It's a small town." I should have been angry with Robert for revealing my location, but I wasn't. "What do you want, David?" "Nothing." His voice was firm. "I don't want your forgiveness. I don't want your money. I just want Jake to have the chance to know you, if you're willing. It doesn't have to be much. Once a month or every 2 months. Whatever you can give." I looked at Jake. The boy watched me with cautious hope in his eyes. It wasn't his fault. It never had been. "Jake," I said softly, "would you like to come to my house sometime? I live by the ocean. You could come, and we could walk on the beach." His face lit up. "Seriously?" I looked at David. "Once a month? You bring him and pick him up. You don't come into my house. We don't have family conversations. You just bring Jake." David nodded, his eyes shining. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you." "Don't do it for you," I said firmly. "I'm doing it for him." And it was true. Jake deserved to know his grandmother. He deserved that connection. And I deserved the chance to be a grandmother on my own terms. The visits began the following month. David brought Jake and left him for 3 hours. Sometimes we walked on the beach collecting shells. Other times we baked cookies in my little kitchen. Slowly, Jake began to open up, talking about school, his friends, his fears, and his parents' divorce. He didn't talk about Fiona, and I didn't ask. It wasn't my place. David kept his word, dropping Jake off and returning exactly at the agreed-upon time. He didn't try to come in. He didn't seek deep conversations. Sometimes I saw him waiting in his car and wondered what he was thinking. But it wasn't my concern. 6 months after that first visit, Jake and I were sitting on my terrace eating sandwiches when he said, "Dad says you're the strongest person he knows." "Oh, really?" "Yeah. He says you were strong even when no one noticed. He says that's what being strong really means." I felt a lump in my throat. "Your dad is wiser than he used to be. He says he wishes he had been like that before." Jake looked at me with serious eyes. "He says he lost you because of his own fault, and that it's the biggest mistake of his life." I didn't know what to say to that. Jake continued, "But he also says the best thing he can do now is make sure I don't make the same mistakes, that I know how to value people while they're still here." I looked toward the ocean, blinking back tears. "Your dad is right about that." That night, after David picked up Jake, I sat on my terrace with a glass of wine. My phone was on the table beside me, and for the first time in almost a year, I considered calling David, not to forgive him, not to rebuild what had been broken, but to tell him that I saw him trying, that I saw his efforts, even if they didn't change the past. Instead, I sent a simple text message, "Jake is a good boy. You're raising him well." The reply came minutes later. "Thank you, Mom. That means more than you know." I didn't reply. There was no need. Months turned into a year. Jake kept coming, and slowly we built our own relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was honest, and it was on my terms. David never asked for more than I was willing to give. Lily, his younger daughter, was now 7 years old, and sometimes she came with Jake. She was shyer, more cautious, but also sweet. I told them stories about their grandfather, Raymond. I taught them to cook recipes he loved. I showed them photos of when David was a child. We weren't a traditional family, but we were something, and that something was enough. One autumn afternoon, 2 years after leaving the resort, I was in my garden planting tulip bulbs when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I looked up, expecting to see one of my friends from town. It was David, alone, without the children. I slowly stood up, taking off my gardening gloves. "It's not visiting day." "I know." He stopped several feet away, respecting the space. I needed to tell you something." I waited, not inviting him closer. "Fiona got remarried to someone she met in therapy." He let out a bitter laugh. "Ironic, right? But I didn't come to talk about her. I came because..." He took a deep breath. "Because I finally understood something. I understood that I don't need your forgiveness to move forward. That my job isn't to get you to forgive me, but to make sure Jake and Lily never have to ask for forgiveness for the same things." "And?" I asked, my voice neutral. "And I came to tell you thank you for letting Jake and Lily know you, for giving them what I wasted. And to tell you..." His voice broke slightly. "To tell you that I finally understand what it means to be strong. It means knowing when to walk away. It means setting boundaries even when it hurts. It means choosing yourself when no one else will." The ocean wind blew between us, carrying the scent of salt and autumnal flowers. "I lost you a long time ago," he continued, "and I spent years not accepting it, but now I do. You're not my mom in the way you used to be. You're Jake and Lily's grandma, and that is more than I deserve." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. David nodded as if he had expected my silence. "I won't show up unannounced again, I promise. I just needed you to know that I finally get it." He turned to leave, but something in me, something small yet persistent, made me speak. David stopped, but didn't turn around. "What you're teaching your children about respect, about boundaries, about not taking people for granted." I paused. "Your father would be proud of that." I saw his shoulders tense, then tremble slightly. He nodded once, quickly, and kept walking without looking back. I stayed in my garden as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. I felt no triumph over my words, no vindication, only a quiet sense of closure. David would never be my son in the way he once was. That relationship died in the lobby of that resort, but he was learning to be a better father, and his children, my grandchildren, were learning lessons he learned too late. That night, I sat on my terrace with Raymond's journal. I had been reading it slowly, savoring each entry like a precious gift. I came to a page near the end, dated only a week before his death. "Brenda asked me today if I regretted anything. I told her no, but the truth is, I do regret one thing: not telling her more often how extraordinary she is. Not for what she does for me or David, but for who she is. Strong when the world expects weakness, gentle when the world offers cruelty. She is my favorite person, and I hope when I'm gone, she remembers that. I hope she finds happiness that doesn't depend on sacrificing herself for others." I closed the journal, silent tears rolling down my cheeks. Raymond had known me, fully seen me, and he had wished for exactly what I finally had: happiness on my own terms. I looked out at the ocean, dark beneath the night sky but illuminated by the moon. The waves continued to crash with their eternal rhythm, indifferent to human drama, to broken families, to healed and wounded hearts. My phone vibrated, a text message from Jake. "Grandma, Dad says I can stay over next month if you want." "Do you want to? We can see the stars from your terrace." I smiled, typing my reply. "I'd love that, sweetie. Bring your sleeping bag." This was my life now. Not the one I had imagined when I was young, not the one I had hoped for when David was born, not the one I had endured for 15 years of exclusion and pain. It was something entirely new, something built on firm boundaries and earned respect, something where I chose who entered my space and how, something where my peace was prioritized. I had lost a family, but I had gained something more valuable. I had gained myself. Years of waiting to be seen, to be valued, to be loved for who I was instead of what I could give, were over. I no longer expected anything from anyone, and paradoxically, that had given me everything. The ocean roared softly in the distance. Stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky, and I, Brenda Thornton, sitting on my small terrace, in my small house by the sea, was finally at peace. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no grandiose apologies that healed decades of pain, no perfect ending where everyone learned their lesson and lived happily ever after. But there was this: a woman who had finally learned that walking away was not abandonment. It was survival. It was self-respect. It was love. The hardest kind of love of all. Self-love that says, "I deserve more than this." There were my grandchildren who would grow up knowing that people have boundaries and that those boundaries must be respected. They would learn that you can love someone from a distance. They would see in their grandmother not a victim, but a woman who chose her own peace over the comfort of others. And there was me, finally free from the weight of expectations that would never be met, free from the need to be needed, free from apologizing for existing. Freedom, I discovered, doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in a house by the sea, on a terrace beneath the stars. It arrives when you finally let go of what was never yours to hold, the responsibility for others' happiness at the cost of your own. I took the last sip of my wine and looked toward the future. I didn't know what would come next. Maybe Jake and Lily would keep visiting. Maybe the relationship with David would remain distant but respectful. Maybe someday, years in the future, we might find something akin to forgiveness. Or maybe not. And that was okay too, because I had learned the most important lesson of all. I didn't need closure from them to have peace. I didn't need their repentance to move on. I didn't need anything from them at all. The only things I needed were this: the sound of the ocean, the star-filled sky, and the absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. I had chosen myself, and that choice, that simple yet revolutionary choice, had changed everything. The night deepened, and I sat a little longer, savoring the stillness, the solitude, which no longer felt like abandonment, but like a sanctuary. Finally, when the ocean chill became too much, I went inside my house. I locked the door behind me, not to keep something out, but to keep something in. My peace, my space, my life rebuilt from scratch. And for the first time in more years than I could count, I went to sleep without a weight on my chest, without questions, without answers, without hopes that would hurt me, only with the deep, silent satisfaction of a woman who had finally found her way home, to her true home, to herself. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.